Hello YouTube, it's Mr. Magz here, and this is a very interesting case. Today's stupid Nintendo article is actually pro Nintendo, which is definitely something I never thought I would be doing on this channel. But I just felt like I had to analyze this article because even though it's pro Nintendo, it has many of the same elements of the other dumb Nintendo articles I've done. It just leaves out information, it fudges numbers to make certain companies look better or worse, and it just generally reeks of fanboyism so bad that I just had to talk about it. So this article is titled, Has the Nintendo Switch Already Won the Console Race? With the tagline, You can't argue with the numbers. And here's where the fanboyism starts. If that line right there, you can't argue with the numbers, wasn't here, the article would have been better. But because it is there, let's argue the numbers for a second. PS4 has already sold over 76 million units. Xbox One has already sold over 30 million. The Nintendo Switch has shipped about 15 million. We're not sure if it's actually sold through that much yet. But let's just give the Switch the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say the Switch has sold over 15 million by now. That's still nowhere near the PS4, and that's less than half of even the Xbox One at this point. And another thing that's wrong with this title, with this concept as a whole, has the Nintendo Switch already won the console race, is that there is documented evidence saying that the Switch is not in the same console race as the PS4 and Xbox One. So comparing numbers directly doesn't even make sense anyway. But since you are, why why do you feel so confident saying you can't argue with the numbers when the Switch's numbers are far and away less impressive than the PS4 and Xbox One's numbers? It just doesn't make sense to me. I'll expand on that topic later in the article. So let's get started. Nintendo Switch has been one of the hottest consoles on the market, and the numbers don't lie. Since the Switch released in March 2017, there have been close to 15 million units sold. Again, that number was documented as being shipped. Have they probably sold that many? Probably yes. But we're not 100% certain of that. So you saying 15 million units sold, that is technically sold to retailers. So Nintendo has gotten that money, but that's not necessarily sold to consumers. There is a difference. So again, just you fudging that number, like I said, it's probably been 15 million units sold already, but the fact that we don't know that for a fact is a little misleading. In under 1 year, the Switch completely clobbered Wii U's lifetime sales. Nintendo aims to sell 20 million units within the next fiscal year, and with that would put the console ahead of both Nintendo GameCube and N64 in lifetime sales. Not only that, but the Switch overtook PS2's first year sales record in Japan. While 2006's Nintendo Wii still stands at the top spot with just over 101 million units sold. Okay. So, the way you phrase this paragraph here, the way you list them, it almost sounds as if you're trying to say that the Nintendo Wii is the highest selling console of all time. If you just switch the placement of the part where you talked about the PS2's record in Japan and the Wii's record, if you switch them, then there wouldn't be this confusion. But since you have it like that, while the Nintendo Wii still stands at the top spot with over 101 million units sold, it really sounds as if you're saying that the Wii is the highest selling console, and we know for a fact that's not true. The PlayStation 2 has sold over 150, and I think the PlayStation 1 sold over 100 as well. I could just be looking too deep into it, but just your phrasing here just feels a bit off. I'm not opposed to you listing all these achievements of the Switch, because yes, they are great achievements. Selling more than the Wii U's 4-year lifespan in 10 months is impressive. selling close to as many as the GameCube did in its lifetime is also impressive. Selling more than the PS2 in its first year in Japan is impressive. But just the way you're phrasing it, you either should have taken that PS2 one out or put it after the Wii numbers just to keep the flow the same. Again, I might just be looking too deep in it. I might just be nitpicking stuff, but that just the way I read it just sounds a bit off. The last paragraph included a lot of numbers, I know. Let me explain them all. The Nintendo Switch was a console that a lot of people were excited about, not only because of the technology, but because they had a game that paired perfectly with the system. The Switch launched alongside Breath of the Wild, 1-2 Switch, Snipper Clips, and more that showcase the Switch's technological features like a museum piece. Um, Outside of those three games, what other games showed off the features of the system? I guess it could be argued that something like Bomberman R showcased multiplayer out of the box, but that really didn't incorporate HD Rumble or really it didn't really like fully utilize portable play, especially the way Breath of the Wild did. 1-2 Switch and Zipper Clips definitely utilized the HD Rumble and motion stuff perfectly, but there weren't really that many other games at launch that I can think of that really did that. Let's see, Fast RMX, Shovel Knight, like I said, Bomberman, Just Dance, I guess. um, but I just feel like you only listing those three and saying and more when there really weren't that many more that like really showcase the system. Again, it's just a bit misleading. And there are going to be multiple times in this article where you either leave out information or only like select certain things to prove your point, and I'm gonna call you out on that. I call other people out on similar stuff, so I'm definitely gonna call you out like throughout the article about stuff like this. For instance, in 1-2 Switch, there is a mini game called Ball Count. In this game, you have to count how many balls are in your box just by the vibrations the Joy-Con make. It's an impressive game that shows off how responsive the Joy-Cons are. Okay, no one cared about 1-2 Switch. The only reason it has sold over 1.5 million units is because it was one of the only real games that came out at launch other than Breath of the Wild. I think it was the only other first party launch game. And it's a party game, so it was just, a little bit of variety alongside Breath of the Wild. I know many people who actually did get 1-2 Switch. They played it for like one or two. They played it with a family or at a party one or two times, and then haven't touched it since. So you touting is the vibrations HD rumble of the Joy Cons impressive? Yes, they are. But saying that the game itself is impressive, I'm just not sure about that. It honestly felt very cheap in certain ways. Felt kind of rushed, like just rushed out to be the next Wii Sports type thing. And I feel like there definitely is a great game in there, but it just wasn't as fleshed out as it could have been. It could have been the party mode easily could have been like one section, but then there are certain mini games in there that could maybe be their own game. But whatever. Maybe I'm just reading too deep into it. Breath of the Wild was a game people have been waiting for and received perfect tens via virtually all video game outlets. That is true. And if, in my opinion, that's honestly one of the few games that really justifies the portable play. If you need to justify it, being able to play Breath of the Wild, a massive open world game like that, on the TV or anywhere you want, is perfect in my opinion. When the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 launched, they did not offer any games that fans were craving. Hold the phone. They did not offer any games that fans were craving. What about Killer Instinct? There hadn't been a Killer Instinct for the better part of 20 years at that point. I think the last one before that was on the N64. So no one was looking forward to that. How about the newest Killzone game? No one was looking forward to that. Okay, if you say so. Maybe just because you weren't looking forward to those games doesn't mean other people weren't. I know for a fact there are multiple people who bought Xbox Ones just to play Killer Instinct. So, yeah, people were excited for games like that. Most of the games that were released on day one were ports, and others were new IPs like Rise of Rome, which was essentially another button mash slasher. Um, did this guy just kind of forget that Breath of the Wild is also technically a port of the Wii U game? So you're trying to marginalize the Xbox One and PS4's launch lineup by just saying, "Oh, it's just a bunch of ports and even a couple of new IPs that aren't even that great." When literally you just praise 1-2 Switch, well, while it's just a kind of mediocre party game, and you also praise Breath of the Wild, which is also just a port. Granted, a port that came out in the same day, but it's still a port. You could get Breath of the Wild on the Wii U as well, assuming you have a Wii U. So again, you're just kind of skewing information in ways that make you look good when you're complaining about those same things in other systems. Again, I call other people out on this stuff all the time. I am definitely going to call you out on this. But yeah, Rise of Rome, it was a kind of a disappointing game. It didn't look very fun. When the Xbox One released, I was most enthralled with Loco Cycle, which was an indie game by Twisted Pixel. That doesn't say much about a system that I paid $500 for at launch. Again, maybe you didn't really want any of the games that came out at launch, but maybe people wanted to buy an Xbox One so they could play the newest Forza or Killer Instinct or or better looking third party games. Just because you were only interested in Loco Cycle doesn't mean other people weren't looking forward to the many other games that came out at launch. You can't just cherry pick information and say, "Oh, because I have an opinion, that means it's fact." That's not at all how this works. Okay, I'll continue. I worked for Microsoft during the Xbox One's first year, and I was often tossed games for free as I had to demo and talk about them each day at work. It was difficult to get excited about a system that didn't offer much except the Kinect integration, which we all know is long dead. But there were other games that came out. Why up here you list three three games on the Switch, yet you only list two on the Xbox One, and one of them is an indie game. You didn't even try to list any of the actual big budget first party and second party studio games, instead just brushing over them as if they don't matter. That's that's not how you look at things objectively. You can't just say, "Oh, the Switch is winning the console war because they have these games that I'm looking forward to, and the Xbox One has no games that I'm looking forward to. Therefore, I think the Switch is winning." That's not how this works. So, objectively speaking, the PS4 and Xbox One had pretty decent launch lineups. Granted, they had a lot of ports, yes, but they still had quite a number of other games that held people over until the other new games came out. Okay. PlayStation 4 provided much of the same ported games as their counterparts, but they also tried to push new IPs and indies like Knack and Angry Birds Star Wars. Is Angry Birds Star Wars what you consider a new IP? Because um, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure Angry Birds Star Wars is just Angry Birds with a Star Wars skin on it. Maybe with a couple of new like Star Wars themed scenarios, but not really anything spectacular or anything like really new that would you consider a new IP. And it's not an indie game because I think that's published by Activision. So yeah, I'm not really. It would have been better for you to say Resogun there, which was I think the highest reviewed game that wasn't a third party port at launch of the PS4. And I know many people who say, yeah, I still play Resogun today, even after all these other great PlayStation games that have come out. I still go back to Resogun. So yeah, I don't know why you singled out Angry Birds. Actually, I do know why because you knew for a fact people who were ignorant about PS4 and Xbox One, who are only reading this because they want to feel justified in their Nintendo Switch love, they would read this and read Knack and Angry Birds as the two premier PS4 games, even though there's also Killzone and Resogun and a couple of other games. They would read that and be, oh, those games suck. Yes, the PS4 is terrible. Nintendo Switch is better. There are other games that came out in the PS4 at launch that are way better than both Knack and Angry Birds. Of course, Microsoft and Sony are well into their console's lifetime and are probably developing the next gen consoles that will inevitably hit retail shelves. I'm actually not too sure about that. In my humble opinion, I don't think we'll even hear about the next gen consoles until 2020. Because Sony had the best year of PlayStation 4 ever. It was this holiday season. I think they sold over 5 million units in November alone, which is insane. Keep in mind that's one third of the overall sales of the Switch. Just keep that in mind. The numbers don't lie. Remember that. Um, so yeah, I don't really see a reason for Sony to go on to the PlayStation 5. The PlayStation 4 is still selling amazingly, and the Xbox One, yeah, it's not selling great, but I could see them holding off until either 2019, 2020, especially since the Xbox One X is essentially their next gen system. It's way more powerful than even the PS4 Pro, and developers are starting to take note of that and actually put more games on the Xbox and promote games primarily on Xbox. Assassin's Creed in general is usually a PlayStation title, but this year Assassin's Creed Origins was primarily pushed on Xbox, specifically Xbox One X. So third-party developers are starting to take notice of that. So I don't really necessarily see a reason for either of them to rush out next-gen consoles. Like I said, they could go until 2020 and probably be just fine, especially Sony. Nintendo isn't slowing down and still plans to launch first-party games within the next 2 years frequently. Hang on, what? Next 2 years frequently? Why didn't you just say they still have plans to launch first party games this year going forward? Saying the next 2 years honestly kind of weakens your argument. And also, that's a really weird phrasing because I don't think we know a single game that's coming out in 2019. So I don't know why you would say 2 years when we only know games through 2018. Metroid and Pokemon might be 2019 titles, but we're not sure about that. So why didn't you just say they still plan to launch many first party games going forward or in the coming years? Why single out 2 years? That just seems to lower your argument. I don't understand that phrasing. Recently, Nintendo announced their newest project, Labo. Labo is an exciting concept that will easily appeal to the younger crowd. If you're looking forward to an article on a parent's insight to Nintendo Labo, read our right, blah blah blah. Okay, I don't care. I will agree. People who are freaking out about Labo were just freaking out for the sake of freaking out. They had no reason to care about this thing since it's not for them. It's clearly for kids and kids at heart. Like, I know for a fact when I was 10, I would have been all over this thing. I mean, I still like robots as it is, but even as a 10-year-old, I would be all over that robot kit. So people like me, and people who have kids, almost guarantee are going to rush to this thing. So yeah, I don't really know why people were really complaining about it. However, I'm not really sure if Nintendo Labo per se is going to help Nintendo directly compete with Sony and Microsoft. Um, will it help boost Nintendo Switch sales? Probably, but in my opinion, stuff like this proves that Nintendo isn't really trying to compete with Sony and Microsoft. They're not directly competing in the 8th gen console war like PS4 and Xbox One are. If anything, Nintendo is either doing their own thing or they're starting the next console. They're starting the next console generation by doing crazy stuff like this. So I'm honestly not entirely sure why you even brought it up. I guess to coincide with the fact that Sony and Microsoft might be releasing stuff soon, but even then I already kind of debunked that, but I'll continue. Nintendo is trying to appeal to all ages, and it's worked so far. Nintendo has games like Bayonetta 2, Payday 2, Kirby Star Allies, Mario Tennis Aces, and more on the horizon for 2018. There will be more great games announced as we get deeper into the year, but so far it's an impressive list. Okay, so uh, I'm not going to say that I'm not excited for the Nintendo Switch in 2018, but that list right there, Bayonetta 2, Payday 2, Kirby Star Allies, and Mario Tennis Aces, that's honestly not that impressive of a list. Kirby and Mario Tennis are definitely great games you want to have on your system, but they're not really system sellers. They're both really both of those are games that people get on a system after they already have it and they're just looking for something else to buy. Bayonetta 2 and Payday 2 are both ports. So according to your logic up here, those don't matter. You just wrote off everything that launched with PS4 and Xbox One because those were a bunch of ports. So now all of a sudden you're lumping together these two third party ports in with I guess Bayonetta 2 is technically like a second party game at this point, but you're lumping together these two ports in with these two not subpar but kind of irrelevant like I don't want to marginalize them, but they're not like as significant as something like a Metroid or Mario, like a mainline Mario game. You're lumping these four games together, which don't really mean that much in the grand scheme of things, and calling it an impressive list. You didn't even mention the fact that Metroid Prime 4 is coming out, or Pokemon is coming out, or even Donkey Kong, which is a port, but still, there are other games that you could have listed here, or even Valkyria Chronicles 4, which you know is coming out this year. That's yes, it's a third party port per se, but it's not a late port, or even Dark Souls Remaster. It's coming date and date with other systems. There are many other games you could have pointed out here that to make this list seem more impressive. So I don't know why you didn't. Is it just is it just your motif to just leave out information and leave out important games? Because in every single time you could have talked about more games, you just kind of didn't. And especially here when you're trying to compile an impressive list of games for 2018, you just kind of dropped the ball and I don't understand it. Like this was your time where I would have allowed you to go full on fanboy and talk about all the great games that are coming out this year, and you talked about four more or less more or less inconsequential games. So yeah, I'm not really sure what exactly you were trying to do there. And all of these are coming out before E3. So yeah, I don't know. Microsoft is struggling to land a first party game that can launch. Talking about Scalebound and Fable. And Sony is in a lull with exclusives. Hold up. Hold up. Sony is in a lull with exclusives. They just launched Shadow of the Colossus. Monster Hunter World is essentially a Sony exclusive, at least in Japan, and many people are buying that on Sony alone. It is on Xbox, sure, but it's essentially a PlayStation exclusive. And also Yakuza 6 and God of War, God of War are coming out in April. So I don't really know what you're why Sony's in a lull with exclusives. If anything, it's Nintendo who is in a lull with exclusive by this logic. If we're just counting Shadow of the Colossus as um if we're not including Monster Hunter World, Shadow of the Colossus launched today. And so that was I'm pretty sure Sony was the first with the first party studio to release a game in 2018. Nintendo isn't releasing a single first party title until March with Kirby Star Allies. So I don't really understand why you're saying Sony is in a lull with exclusives. Um, uh, and it's not like this article was written super long ago. It was written after Monster Hunter came out and right before Shadow of the Colossus came out. So I, they at no point were they are they in a lull with exclusives. There are plenty of Sony games coming out this year, relatively soon. So yeah, I don't really know. Again, this entire article just reeks of fanboyism. Just marginalize games like that. Oh, I guess you could argue Shadow of the Colossus is just a remaster, but you praise Breath of the Wild for being the one of the great uh, Switch launch titles, and it is an amazing game, but it's just a port. It's the same thing. And you also tried to say that Bayonetta 2 is part of this impressive list of 2018 Nintendo titles, but it's just a port. So I'm just not sure what exactly you're trying to say. Why exactly you're trying to say that Sony is in a lull with exclusives when they're not. Nintendo was taking advantage of the market, and if they continue to do that, I guess, they will indefinitely win this generation's console war. Wait, I thought the numbers don't lie. How could they win this console war even though they're not really competing in this console war? Nintendo already lost this generation's console war with the Wii U, like abysmally. The PS4 and Xbox One destroyed the Wii U. The Switch isn't Nintendo's second chance at winning. The Nintendo Switch started the ninth generation. That's how it works. But let's just assume for a second that the Nintendo Switch is directly competing with PS4 and Xbox One. The PS4 sold over 20 million units in 2017. Kimishima has said he expects the Nintendo Switch to sell over 20 million in 2018. So let's just assume that the PS4 does slightly worse this year. Let's say 15 million. That still puts the PS4 at 90 million units, and the Switch will need about 35 million units. If that trend continues, by the time the PS5 comes out, the PS4 would be up in the 130-ish million units. The Nintendo Switch wouldn't have even come close to that. So they're really, at the pace the PS4 is going right now, there's no possible way for the Nintendo Switch to beat it in this console race. So this generation, if you are trying desperately to compare the PS4 and PS4, Xbox One, and Switch in the same generation, there's no possible way that Nintendo can win if you don't try to argue with the numbers like you say here. Like, would I love it if Nintendo did somehow win this generation's console race? Sure, but that's just not. That's just literally impossible considering just how well the PS4 is doing. And I would have the exact same logic going into the ninth generation, which the Switch is actually part of that generation. By the time the PS5 does come out, the Switch would probably have over 40 plus million units sold. Maybe even 50 at that point, assuming it comes out in 2020, like I think. By that point, I would have the same logic of, oh, the PS5 can't possibly win, objectively speaking, if the Switch keeps going at this pace. Because I just that logic of you can't argue if that sentence right there, you can't argue with the numbers. If that wasn't there, I would have gone much easier on this article. I might not have even made this video to begin with. But because that sentence right there is there, I have to call them out on it because going by the numbers, the PS4 is objectively killing it. And there's no possible way for Switch to really catch up unless the PS4 just stops selling units today. And even then, it would take probably 2 to 3 years for Switch to actually finally catch up. So, yeah, what do you guys think of all this? Do you think the Switch has any chance to win this generation's console race? Are you like me and think the Switch isn't actually really competing with PS4 and Xbox One, at least this gen? Um, so yeah, leave thoughts and all that down below. Like to have a discussion going, and I'll see you.